Susan.
Yeah, he's struggling with substance abuse, alcohol.
Susan.
It
Susan.
is. And I don't know in his case, but in my friend's case, he has some undiagnosed mental problems that he needs to get diagnosed. He does. He needs to go to a professional. That's it. And he said all the right things. So they're good. And all my friends are. I'll believe it when I see it.
It's all in the.
We hope. Yeah. Show me in your actions. You better watch out or your wife's going to run against you.
She can have it.
You'll let her. That's not what I was expecting. Don't let her. I thought you'd fight her on that. You're going to let her do it. I can't say that I blame
The only
her.
bad thing is she criticizes. She goes, "You're not doing it right. You remember our training?"
Yeah. Yeah, she's gone to more sessions than anybody.
Hilarious.
Yeah. She's down there. I've seen her in sessions.
She's really good.
Yeah.
Are you providing?
I wonder what husband and wife have circled.
Evidently.
There's nobody else to.
I think that's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started with our city council meeting this evening. We appreciate all of you in attendance. We'll get started with tonight's agenda with an opening that'll be provided by Council Member Chris Snell after Preston from PAC 523 will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this evening and express gratitude for the privilege we have to gather to conduct the business of Kaysville City this evening. Father, we thank Thee for the many blessings we have been given. We're grateful for this wonderful land, the freedoms that we enjoy, and are grateful for this safe community in which we live. We pray that as we conduct the business of the city tonight, that we may do so in a spirit of camaraderie and friendship, that we may make the decisions for the betterment of the community. We are grateful again for those who labor so hard and put so much on the line to preserve our freedoms, both in the world as well as here in our community. And we pray that Thou wilt bless them to keep them safe and out of harm's way. We love Thee, Father, and say these things humbly in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Will the audience please rise? Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. That was awesome. Thank you very much, Councilmembers Snell and Preston. Thank you for being willing to come up and stand in front of all these people and lead us in the pledge. You did a wonderful job. Before we get started on our agenda, we do have agendas available on the left over on the wall on your left. You're more than welcome to grab one and check off as we move through tonight's list. It seems to make it go a little faster, depending on who you talk to. We'll start with introductions. My name is Steve Hyatt. I serve as the mayor of Kaysville City.
Jake Garn, Kaysville City Council.
Susan Lee, City Council.
Chris Snell, City Council.
Larry Page, City Council.
Shane Scott, City Manager.
Maria Devereaux, City Recorder.
Andy Thompson, Engineer.
Ryan Judd, IT Manager.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is Community Garden Recognition. We will turn the time to our Community Garden Committee and Ron Zollinger, the chair of the committee. Ron. Yes.
Oh,
What?
do you want to say anything to set us up?
Well, I was just going to let you guys explain what has happened and what we've done throughout the season. Is that what you're talking about, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just always want to give you an opportunity to.
Oh, no, you do a fantastic
Well,
job.
we appreciate Susan and her support, Mayor, of the Kaysville Community Garden and our Yard and Garden Committee. We've had a wonderful season. This is about our 6th year in a row of doing things during the summer, trying to recognize citizens and their outstanding efforts to beautify Kaysville and raise productive gardens and be water conscious and make Kaysville's hometown really a beautiful hometown. We have two people, a couple, who have worked now 3 years as managers of our community garden. And I think it's rare to find people who are so committed to putting forth more than 100% in this volunteer capacity. I think they have a vested interest, Mayor, because I know Carol has produced many bottles of vegetables. But I'm going to turn it over to Brent and Carol Barney, who are managers of our Kaysville Community Garden. Keep in mind, we have a few plots at Tri-City Nursery that are utilized by a few citizens, but our primary location is South Main. So Carol and Brent Barney.
Well, we didn't really prepare a long speech or anything, and that's probably good for a short meeting, right? But anyway, what we thought we would do again this year, we appreciate the sponsorship, the support of Kaysville City, and we just brought a token of our appreciation, some of the produce from the garden. I'd like to present it to the council. And there's a couple of little items in a box over here. The garden's really winding down right now, so we didn't have a huge box. But there's a little sampling if anybody in the audience would like to take a sample with them on the way. But a couple of things. We really enjoyed working in the garden as a volunteer for Kaysville City. The best part about it is we have probably 50 people in Kaysville area that we've never knew before. And so I think it's a really good thing. We have a few struggles here and there with the garden. The weather, for one, doesn't cooperate all the time. It got real hot in July for us. But between hot weather and a few bugs, we still end up with a lot of produce. And the best thing, like I said, friendships are developed in the garden over there amongst people in the city. So we have probably 11 or 12 different people this year than we had last year. We have a total of about 56 plots, 6 feet wide, average 50 feet long. And we've already got calls from people interested for next year. And so we're almost thinking we should go to a grading system a little bit, but we don't want to kick anybody out of the garden now because everybody's having so much fun with it. But so we'll see how it goes, and we appreciate, like I say, the support of the city, and also the Parks Department has been real helpful, Laura and Vance, and Ron, of course, heading up the committee. I want to give him credit too for that, and thank you.
And I just wanted to say just a few words. Brent and Carol, this program is a success because of you two and the efforts you put into it. And the enthusiasm it shows, that is why so many people want to be a part of this. You know, the friendly reminders, I don't know anybody that can chastise for not pulling weeds, but make you feel good about it, that you need to go over and do it. So anyway, thank you so much, and thank you for the baskets. Way bigger than last year. Yeah. Way bigger. Anyway, thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Looks like it was a bumper crop. Thank you.
Just so the audience knows that we're not bribing, no. Just because we want to be politically correct, we offer you those vegetables and the audience. There's a grab bag over there I don't know if we need to be so politically correct, but we're glad to present those to the council. We also want to recognize Don Cottrell and his sister.
Oh, that's
It's their property. They're paying the taxes, they're paying the water, and they're very excited to donate this property to Kaysville in this behalf. So our hats off to Don and his sister. So thanks again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. And Cole, do you mind standing up for just a minute? Brent and Carol, they just wanted to know who you were, so that's who. Thanks.
As I think about this, the Yard and Garden Committee and where it started and what it's become now, and even this community garden idea, we did a little piece of land just next to City Hall over here, next to this old building. And I remember you just have to ask the question. Somebody thought, is this really going to take off? We don't want to designate that if it's not. And now we're 25 times that size and people just knocking down the door to try and participate. So thanks to Brent and Carol and Zon and Ron and Zollinger and the entire committee for everything you do. It's tremendous.
Absolutely.
All right, the next on our agenda is Business Spotlight. We have with us representatives from Silky Skin MD. We'll turn the time to Dr. Jacqueline Silky.
I just want to thank you guys for inviting me to come, and we put a little presentation together just to show you what our business is about. Hopefully.
And for those who may not know, located on South Main Street, about 400 south on the west side?
192, close.
Okay, well, that was close.
Close enough for city work.
Yeah, that's right. So where was your pothole again? I promise we fixed it.
thank you for allowing us to come and be a part and welcoming us into the city of Kaysville.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'll just say, when I talked to Dr. Silke beforehand, I have been in and been a patient, and I was debating whether or not, because I don't exactly have silky skin, that she would want me to say, to say, oh, you didn't finish, you've only done the first one. But it's been a great business, and as noted in that video, they came in and had their ribbon cutting and opened their business, and I thought it was pretty special. They won an award from the Yard and Garden Committee, their first month open, so it was really nice and continues to be a beautiful building and a beautiful facility, and I would encourage all of you, if anyone wants to learn more, they can visit. Remind me of what your website is again.
It's Silky Skin MD, and we did bring some coupons back there for everyone here to get 20% off cleaning services or products or anything like that, just to swing by and see us.
Excellent. SilkySkinMD.com. And 20% off coupons in the back table in the back of the room. Excellent, thank you. Let's give them a round of applause for coming. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Silke. Next item on our agenda is call to the public. This is the time in the City Council meeting when we open the microphone to any of you in attendance that would like to address the City Council. As you review tonight's agenda items, there are no public hearings associated with tonight's City Council meeting. If you're not specifically listed on the agenda as a presenter and would like to address the City Council regarding one of tonight's agenda items, this would be your opportunity to do so. We do ask that you keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. You'll hear a subtle beeping at the conclusion of 3 minutes. That's our city recorder keeping track of time. And when you hear that beeping, we'd ask that you wrap up your comments. So with that, we open the microphone to call to the public.
My name is Joseph Brown. I'm here with my wife, Deborah Brown. We live on the corner of Shepherd's Lane and 350 East. And we own approximately 1 3/4 acres, and we're dividing the property. And we're going to sell 3/4 of an acre. We did have it sold, but the buyer backed out. But at this time, we would just like approval to divide that piece of property. And we would also like to ask for what I believe is called a deference on putting in sidewalks due to the fact that there's only one small section of sidewalk on Shepherd Lane as you come up over the overpass. The overpass is not capable of having sidewalk. Then you've got one little section of sidewalk just past Benchmark to 5th East, and then you've got no sidewalk on either side of the road all the way down to 50th East. That's 4 blocks of no sidewalk on either side. And I'm also asking a deference of no sidewalk on the section of property that we have at 350 East due to the fact that there is sidewalk on the west side, and my neighbors to the north of me have no sidewalk, and their properties are incapable of being divided because there isn't enough property. So to me, it would not make sense to have sidewalk, no sidewalk, no sidewalk, sidewalk, where they recently built some twin homes. So I am asking that you please take into consideration that we don't want sidewalk put in, but we do ask for approval to divide the property at this time so that we can be able to sell that property as a parcel of land. And we are, we're not sure who's going to buy it. We're not going to the Planning Commission to ask to build homes on it at this point. That would be up to the buyer. We would just like to sell the parcel of land. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
And when we get to that agenda item too, I probably should have been more clear. So even though you're not listed on the agenda, being the applicant will still provide an opportunity for you to speak, and it may have some follow-up questions, I assume, as well from the council. Thank you. Any other items for call to the public? We just ask you to come one at a time.
Unusual.
It's the same joke every 2 weeks, but usually I get a few more courtesy laughs. But all right, hearing none, we'll close call to the public and move to the next on our agenda, which is vacation of a portion of Lot 215 of Hest Farms Estates, ordinance 1691. Mr. Thompson.
You may recall that earlier this summer, we vacated a portion of property, or we approved a boundary adjustment between Kaysville City and Farmington City for the small piece of property outlined in yellow here on the map. The owner of the property owns the property to the east in Farmington, wants to sell a vacant lot he's owned in Kaysville, but would like to keep a little more buffer around his home. So we approved the boundary adjustment. This is the city boundary along the channel there, to allow this piece to be annexed into Farmington. What we need to do to clean that up is to vacate that portion of the lot out of this plat, so that it can be fully annexed into Farmington. We can't have a subdivision lot that straddles two municipal boundaries, so we need to vacate this, and then they can add it to the lot in Farmington. The lot that's remaining in Kaysville still meets all the requirements of the zoning and is a very buildable lot.
Great. And the process that we completed before was simply the annexation change, and now this is second step for vacation?
That's correct.
Will there be any further steps, or is this the final step to cross all the T's?
I believe this
and dot the
should
I's?
take care of everything we need to do here.
Not that I care, you know, we can't have this again. No, that's not it, but I just was wondering if there were any other steps that we would see. We've discussed this, quite a bit over the last several months, and have had a period on the annexation, the adjustment of the boundary. So I'll make a motion that we adopt the ordinance vacating the portion of lot 215 of Hess Farms Estates number 8 subdivision.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee. Any further discussion? Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next item on our agenda is preliminary and final plat for Brown subdivision consisting of 2 lots on 1.75 acres of property. Mr. Thompson.
The request is to split this single piece of property into 2 lots. This property is located just off Shepherd Lane and 350 East, as shown here in yellow on the map. Currently has a house on the front of the property. The desire is to split a lot off the back, be available for sale. They've submitted a subdivision plat showing the 2 lots. The back lot would be about 3/4 of an acre, and the front lot would be just shy of an acre. As far as the lots go, that meets all the zoning. It's been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. The issue that was brought up a few minutes ago is the issue of the sidewalk. As you're all aware, our ordinance says that when you subdivide a piece of property, you're required to bring all the street improvements up to the current standard, including the curb gutter and sidewalk. There is curb and gutter along the 350 east side. These 2 lots, as were mentioned, do not have sidewalk. The property north of that has installed sidewalk. Coming this way, this subdivision here installed all the improvements and brought them to the east edge of this property. The Browns property currently has no curb and gutter or sidewalk along Shepherd Lane. We've explained to them that there's no provision in the ordinance currently to just waive that requirement. Our ordinance says it can be deferred at the discretion. They still have to put the money down now, and then at the time we do a bigger project, then we would use that money to install those improvements. In this case, the staff feels where the curb and gutter is installed and the sidewalk curb and gutter brought to the border on the east, there's no technical reason that it can't be installed in the correct location and done properly at this point. We typically do the deferral if it's a very isolated piece and we have some concern that it may go in the wrong spot, and we'd have to replace it in the future when the rest of the road was improved.
Okay, Andy, just to make sure, so we know exactly where that needs to be installed, and
Yes.
okay, for the gutter
And we are talking about all improvements, curb, gutter, and sidewalk for the stretch along Shepherd Lane. Is that correct?
Yes, and sidewalk along 350.
And sidewalk on 350 East, along the entire stretch?
Yes, sir. Along the stretch of their property that's being proposed for development.
So the curb and gutter just comes to this point, and there's nothing around the radius of this corner then?
I don't remember. I think that's correct.
Maybe maybe the property owner could answer for us.
Yeah.
If you'll notice, just to the neighbor on my east, there is a jog in the road on our property. And so the sidewalk is going to be tough to go straight through. I've got 2 huge sycamore trees that they're kind of have some historical value to them. And one thing that we did notice when we had the land surveyed, the property that was recorded, I actually go 11 feet onto Shepherd's Lane. And so I'm a little bit confused on where the curb and gutter would end up going. Because if you look at that neighbor to the east, there's a barricade sign there and the road jogs out about 3 or 4 feet. And so if it is required, please take into consideration, there's been multiple subdivisions down Shepherd's Lane without curb and gutter installed.
Mr. Brown, before you go, I just have one question for you. By deferring it, because you'd have to, I guess, put the money down now to do the project, the main advantage to deferring it would be because of the trees?
Because of the trees, and also the fact that in the near future, Shepherd Lane will be widened, and I believe that sidewalk would be coming out within a couple of years. And please take that into consideration as well. I can understand 350 East if we don't get a deference there, but having Shepherd's Lane to throw that in and then take those trees out that I consider of extreme value, and having the road widened, I just can't see the point in doing Shepherd's Lane at this point.
Thank you.
Andy, can you speak to the widening of Shepherd Lane, plans for that?
Kaysville City has a master plan that designates the ultimate width of all our roads. The curb and gutter would be installed based on that plan. We don't anticipate anything that would require it to be wider than what we've planned for.
So if the council opted to require improvements or install at installation of the curb and gutter, you would be able to determine where that needed to be?
Yes, sir.
Reasonably? Okay.
And I have another question for you, Andy, as well. Although I remember when a lot of those homes went in on Shepherd Lane, I've been here long enough, I wasn't tuned in to understand, or I don't know when the ordinance changed. So I guess at some point there wasn't an ordinance requiring curb and gutter on new developments, and now there is. When did that ordinance change, or what's the circumstances there?
The bulk of Shepherd Lane was developed about 25, 26 years ago. It's actually before I was working with the city. So I understand that the developer, that same requirement was in place. The developer came and said, I'm developing 3/4 acre lots along here. I'd like to preserve the rural nature of this development. Is there a way I can defer the installation of those improvements? At that time, the process was that they would sign what we called a lien agreement. It was an agreement that said, we promise that if and when the city decides these improvements are needed, the adjacent property owner will be responsible for the payment of that. And that can be enforced with a lien on the property. 10, 15 years after that, the council determined that that was not a comfortable thing to try to call those agreements on the people. You may have seen Farmington is dealing with that issue currently. And they said, we're not going to do those agreements any longer. If there's a legitimate reason not to install the improvements, they pay for them, we put the money in an account, and when another project comes and it's time, then we don't have to go back to the new owner.
Just a thought about this. I know that when you redo the road, because on the condition of what Shepherd Lane is like, we're going to be redoing that road sooner, I would hope, than later. Is it best to wait to do those improvements at the same time that we do the upgrades to that road or the improvements to that road? What's this?
Typically, when it's the asphalt pavement that needs to be replaced, in the case of Shepherd Lane, the curb and gutter is not touched, and it's actually better to have curb and gutter in place before the road is paved. It holds the pavement together, similar to what we're talking about on Burton Lane. It typically works better to have the curb and gutter in place.
And then the other thought that I had, when they give the money to the city to place it on hold, is it a lien on the home or is it actual money that the city receives? And is it going to be enough money to cover the cost if the cost of putting it in goes up once we receive the agreement? Well, then what happens?
It is cash that they pay to the city. It's based on current bid prices. So if inflation goes up more than the interest that's gained on that money, then the city does have some risk.
One more question, just as far as the trees and the alignment of the sidewalk. Is that true, based on your understanding, that if the sidewalk goes in now, the trees would have to come out?
Based on what I've observed, I believe that would be the case.
And maybe the property owner could speak to that. I don't want to make a judgment call based on Google Street View, but would installation of the curb and gutter still save the trees for now? It looks like from this angle it's close, but would you be able to put in the curb and gutter? If you can come to the microphone and state your name, please. Sorry.
Deborah Brown. I was looking at Google Street today too, and short of me actually going out there and doing some measurements, I'm not sure how the curb and gutter corner from 350 East to Shepherd is going to line up with the sidewalk and not interfere with the trees.
I see.
But since I was just looking at it, I'm sure you guys can get a better angle on that with the Google Street, but it looks like it's not possible. The trees will go if we put curb and gutter in where the curb and gutter currently is, just east of us.
Okay. Thank you.
So Andy, does the city have right of way there already? Or the property owner mentioned this jog in the property between where the property adjoining to the east there connects and has improvements made, and then it jogs out. Sounds like there's a Jersey barrier there. I haven't driven by there for a couple of weeks anyway, and I didn't pay attention at the time. So
depends what you look at. If you look at the county ownership plats, they show the right-of-way line going straight from the end of the subdivision to the intersection. You look at their survey, it shows they own property into the road. However, another requirement of subdivision is you dedicate any roadway as required.
Mm-hmm.
Are we not addressing that issue in this? I mean, if we're...
Their subdivision plat shows those improvements on Shepherd Lane and showing that area being not included in the lot.
At the design width already?
At the design width, yes.
They are or are not being included?
They are showing that on their plan.
Okay.
Too quick. They're showing these.
And then
laser today. They're showing these improvements in the prescribed Shepherd Lane width.
Okay. Well, I think it's just up to the council what you feel like doing. In this area, I totally agree that it probably seems if maybe nonsensical to require something that's not going to go to anywhere. That being said, in this area, we've had a lot of people say, when are you going to put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk? And that's the only issue I potentially see is saying, well, we didn't require it there because it didn't really go anywhere. But then having someone say, but that was a pretty big piece to not to require. Now, of course, we could collect the funds and have them on hand and do it when improvements are made on Shepherd. Sounds like the risk to the city would be that the cost to do that, we'd estimate now judging by some of our other agenda items, that might be hard to estimate since not a lot of people are bidding right now, but depending on what formula we use, that might be your only obstacle.
Just another question, real quick. So on Shepherd Lane, the last projects, the homes or subdivisions or whatever that have been built, what was the last time it was not required? How long ago was that?
There were some on Shepherd Lane. I think it's beyond the end of the map I have here. There was a couple similar lot splits down just west of 50 East Street on the south side of the road. Knowing that the new subdivision was coming in behind them, we allowed them to pay for those improvements so that the entire stretch could be done at one time instead of 3 different people putting 100 feet in each individually. So that was probably within the last 2 years.
Could I ask just a broader question along the line of discussion that you were going on, Mayor, and that is, we have a lot of needs in various areas of the city. Some of them are safe routes to school, like with the new Case Creek Elementary, and there's also an elementary fairly close to this area, new subdivision south of Shepherd Lane. So clearly further west, there's maybe more of an issue. I don't really have a sense for safe routes to school or walking routes along Shepherd Lane. How critical is that right now?
I think on the lower portion, down
probably
near the
more on the
intersection
lower
where the crosswalk is and the road going into the school, they're certainly becoming more critical. In this area, generically, it'd be serving just the people in these 2 small subdivisions to have that piece of sidewalk. And as was mentioned, this piece does not exist yet. Theoretically, they could come down here and go around to the trail and through. I haven't had complaints about that particular route, but it is on the far end, so there's not as many students walking right there.
So we don't have a sense, and maybe when the rest of the improvements would be done. Of course, my preference, if wishes could be fishes, would be that all of these would be done right away, because I think it's all needed. But when we look at the whole project, I think we do need to be talking pretty soon about how we get that done, because I'm pretty determined to get it done somehow, and yet I realize we can't just run over our budget and change who pays for it. And at the same time, we don't, it's a pretty difficult thing to call liens, but I understand that and what Farmington's doing. But on the other hand, there were agreements made when, to circumvent, to defer in the past when that development was done. And there's a need there, and I think at some point, although it may be a very unpopular decision, we have to work something out and talk to the residents there who have that obligation and see if we can move it forward. So I'm, just talking in the broader sense, but.
My only reservation is probably, and I haven't heard, I don't know how much feedback we've had from these folks, but I did have a conversation with someone last night who lives on 600 North and Angel Street about the lack of sidewalks between the west side of Angel Street, 600 North, down to the New Hill Farms. And I just pulled that up as well. And the number of homes is almost the exact same. And her concern is how do we connect our street with, and I know this isn't Angel Street, but how do we connect our street with the kids that have to attend the school to this area? My gut would be, if we were questioning the community council or asking them on your safe routes, is this something we're okay to defer, we would probably get a negative response. But.
And just another thought on this, with how hard we're going to try to get Shepherd Lane as a priority job to be done, I can't see deferring it, because I can see us actually improving Shepherd Lane shortly, and then we're going to have all those homes put in the curb and gutter and the sidewalks. And so all we're talking about is maybe a year at the most that you wouldn't be putting it in, which doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There's one of the problems you're gonna have, maybe I can show you.
Can you,
Our curb and gutter
Ryan, can you get a street view
on
on that?
350 actually comes down around onto Shepherd's Lane, and then we come across here, and we have a jog here. This sidewalk is actually jogged in on my neighbor to the east, so do I put the sidewalk clear back in on my property, or do I put it where the road is?
And maybe that's
Or do I
it.
put it where
Yeah.
my surveyor indicated to the property that I do own, which is 11 feet on Shepherd's Lane? So there's a little bit of confusion there for me on where that sidewalk's gonna go. Because as of now, where that sidewalk ends on the neighbor to the east, we'd have to turn the sidewalk and take it out to where the new curb and gutter is gonna go. So there's a jog there. And if we need time to look at it and discuss it, that's fine. We don't have to have an answer tonight, but I think it needs to be looked at.
But even,
Because I'm confused on where the survey's gonna come in and where I actually put that curb and gutter.
even if the city council delayed requiring the improvements, it feels like that's an issue we would need to resolve now anyway, so that we don't give some false expectation as to, well, we'll just deal with it later when that probably needs to be addressed regardless of what the council decides.
Yeah, one of the problems we run into is we get, with these subdivisions that are built up, and then the areas that have been allowed to either defer or not put in the improvements.
You've got curb and gutter here, but on 350, my curb and gutters ends right there, so there's a jog there.
I see.
Yeah, and I guess one thought, not from an engineering perspective, because I'm certainly not an engineer, but just from an aesthetic standpoint, the curb and gutter is a little more problematic, I guess, because the road seems to be a straight shot, but I don't see any reason why sidewalk can't curve. I mean, there's a lot of sidewalks in town that curve, so can you address that, Andy?
This doesn't show a jog.
Yeah, we do have, or you have some discretion. We've allowed sidewalks to be installed at non-standard locations to preserve trees in the past. I think maybe what I would suggest at this point is that we approve the subdivision with normal requirements and then allow us to work with the Browns on some of these issues they brought up. And if there's a need for the council to make an exception, then we'd come back and ask for that if we can't figure it out otherwise.
I don't disagree with that, Andy. In fact, I had kind of a similar thought, only I think I thought just the opposite approach. Would it be better? I mean, there's not a real rush, it doesn't sound like, to grant approval right now. Maybe we table it for another couple of weeks or maybe a month or whatever while we work out some of the issues. I don't know that there's a need for us to make a decision on this tonight.
As well.
On that. I don't know who.
Are you okay with that if we table it and wait for the?
While we work out on some of the issues of the placement.
I'm fine with that, but do we still get approval to subdivide?
Oh. Hey, wait, I forgot, you are looking to sell the property, right?
To sell,
So,
yeah. Sell the section.
You wouldn't be able to, if we
we'd have to
tabled it,
subdivide.
you would have to complete the subdivision.
It won't happen in a couple of weeks, but.
Well, Councilman Snell, let me just offer this. If you're comfortable working with the city on some of those issues, I guess, and this is just my assessment, that because we're so far behind on curb and gutter, I just don't see making any exceptions for anyone at the ordinance, although I'm certainly sympathetic to your individual circumstances, and if, to the extent that the city can be creative and, if it's possible to work around the trees or whatever, that would be great. But I just don't think we can afford to get any further behind on deferment, so I'd be willing to make a motion to approve with that stipulation that those issues the city will work with the Browns on
with normal requirements and then working out the particulars.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Page for discussion as outlined. Any further discussion? Thank you. Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And I've been,
Do you understand what happened?
We can still sell. We gotta work with the city on what to do with curb and gutter.
Right.
Correct.
On that.
The subdivision was approved.
Yes,
So, okay.
And we're willing to work with you.
Yeah.
thank you.
As are we with you, so that's good. You bet. Thank you.
I've been made aware that Councilmember Dave Adams will not be joining our meeting this evening. Just point of information. Next item on our agenda is Amanda's Place 2 subdivision at 472 and 482 North Main Street. Mr. Thompson.
Over the course of this summer, we've looked at this project a few times. Properties on North Main Street, highlighted here in yellow on the corner of Creekside Lane and Main Street. It's 2 homes on the front. That was recorded as Phase 1. Phase 2 is now the new lots in the back, the 3 new lots in the back, served by a private lane. This is exactly the same configuration that we saw when we approved Phase 1. Minor change from the preliminary plat. They originally had a flag lot. Found that for various reasons, it made the lots more buildable to go to the private lane configuration. Other than that, everything's the same. It's all in compliance. The engineering's in good order, and Planning Commission has recommended approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
The only question I had on this, we've talked about it a lot over the last several months. The private lane subdivision, can you just, Andy, point out what the stipulations are, the differences between a private lane, the actual road, and, say, a public street, and what the differences are there, and just to make sure that, you know, potential homeowners in here can look back at these minutes, and they want to make sure that it's clear to them that there are differences between a private street and a public street.
There are differences. Most significantly, this is the private lane area here. Most significantly is the width can be altered from what's required in a public street. It's based primarily on the fire department's discretion as what's safe. They do not go below 20 feet wide. I was trying to look real quick and see if I can see how wide this one is. I believe it's 24 feet of drivable surface.
24. I think it's 24.
Still too little, sorry.
24 is correct. I believe.
24 feet of drivable surface, which is enough for 2 cars to pass each other easily. It would also allow an emergency vehicle to access the back lots. It is not maintained by the city. Snow removal, asphalt repair, all those things are the responsibility of the homeowners. We require covenants to be recorded with the development when there's private facilities that outline the maintenance responsibilities and how it's collected and who pays for what. So that's
Okay. One of the primary reason I wanted to discuss that is that a lot of times, a number of years after a private lane subdivision is approved, folks who live on a private lane will come to the city and ask if the private lane can become a public. And those are, you know, that's a common question, or it's not unheard of anyway to have that happen. And sometimes it simply can't happen because there's not enough right-of-way, or the lot sizes aren't big enough, or whatever. There's a lot of different things. So anyway, just wanted to make sure that it would be clear for these three proposed new homeowners will understand they are responsible for this little drive. And
And just one other thing, I know that the drainage of the water was a big issue when this was first brought up. Is that still taken into consideration for these lots?
That's been looked at very closely. The drainage issue came from these residents here. There's currently a retaining wall about to the middle of this lot. With these lots all being higher, they have committed to keep that retaining wall in place. So this property's 2 to 3, 4 feet lower than these properties, and drainage will not be able to impact any of these homes.
Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion to accept Amanda's Place Phase 2 subdivision final plat.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Snell for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Snell, will you start a vote, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. The next item on our agenda is Streams Edge subdivision.
Been reviewing this summer as well. This is the property just off Phillip Street and just west of the rail trail, kind of in the northwest part of town. Here's the part of Angel Street the mayor was referring to earlier. We reviewed this preliminary plat several weeks ago, had some discussion about whether a road should be required to come out to Phillip Street here. City Council determined that was not necessary and approved this preliminary plat. There is the access to the rail trail shown here. Other than that, this is identical to the preliminary plat. Engineering's in good order, and it's been recommended for final plat approval.
Is there a representative from Symphony Homes here?
I was here Thursday last week at the Planning Commission, and there was no discussion.
They've been very accommodating, is working through the issues. I was just going to jokingly say, would you mind if we tabled it for 30 days to see what he said? Since he's not here.
Andy, that access to the rail trail, is that going to be a subdivision maintained, or is that going to be one where
They would prefer to dedicate it to the city in discussion with the Parks Department where it's attached to the trail. They feel it's not a big issue to take that over.
Okay.
Is it similar to the one on Joshua then? Do we maintain that one or clear that one as well as part
Yes,
of the
we do.
parks?
We clear that way?
Where it's right on the trail and it's just a jog in and out, they don't have a problem with that. If it's isolated out somewhere on its own, then those become more problematic to try to maintain.
And I know there are some trails, I'm not even sure how to, sort of improvised trails, pathways to the trail that people have created that don't have asphalt and things like that. So obviously this is going to be an asphalt
I think the intent is that
trail access.
it's an 8-foot strip of property. The intent is that we would pay from fence post to fence post, so it was solid asphalt and the maintenance would be greatly reduced.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
I'd like to make a motion. Oh,
Go ahead, you've started.
I'll make a motion to approve the Streams Edge subdivision final plat.
Yeah, I'll second, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll
First.
second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Page, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next on our agenda is award of contract for Burton Lane curb and gutter.
As you're all aware, we had a pavement replacement project scheduled for this summer on Burton Lane. It was suggested that we complete the improvements, meaning the curb and gutter on the very west end of Burton Lane, before the new asphalt went down. We've been trying to get all that coordinated and underway before the asphalt season ended. Per previous discussions, we had that designed. The formal bidding process was waived by the council. We contacted about a half a dozen contractors and asked them to give us a bid on this project. We received only one bid. It was from the company that's doing the other asphalt work. The bid was for, I believe, $68,000 and some change. It's a little higher than we expected. There are some things we can do. For example, there's about a $9,000 pay item to move a fire hydrant that has to be moved to be behind the curb. I've checked with our Public Works Department. They feel like they could do that on our own and had a little bit of a reduced cost there. Other than that, we can look at other things we can do, but that's the only bid we received. They've indicated they can get it done before paving season ends this year. That's assuming weather maintains itself in a normal fashion. So I think it comes down to a simple choice. If you want it done this year, this is the only option I think that's available. If we want to postpone it and rebid it as a project in the spring, possibly with other elements on Sunset Drive, we might save a few dollars in doing that, but that would delay the project by some amount of time.
And you said here that no bid for relocating the existing telephone pedestal.
Yeah,
is that this?
That's commonly taken care of by the phone company. That
Okay.
in the hurry to get it out, we missed that, left it on the bid sheet.
So the phone company will do that?
They, by our franchise agreement, they're responsible to relocate their facilities.
Okay, but the item just above that on the bid, the $9,200 for relocating a fire hydrant, will,
That's the one we can do
that's the one that our Public Works Department can do, so we're looking at a little less than $60,000 now.
Yes.
Is that right, for the total price? Actually, about 59 and
Somewhere
change.
right
Okay.
How does this tie in with our procurement process? I mean, it looks like we invited 6 people to bid and only 1 bid, which is not, I guess, great, but then we're also at $69,000 too. Are we covering all of our bases there to say, I assume that when we went out, we thought maybe it was going to be under another amount, but.
Again,
Just as a reminder, at our July 7th meeting, you set aside the normal procedures in an effort to get this done
For this.
when we did this, so, which Andy had to remind me of today. I actually sent him the exact same message on email asking, why didn't we put this out to bid, so.
It's unfortunate. The process was, it wasn't the best on this, and I think that's part of the problem. I'm not looking forward to not have this done and have all that mud and everything coming up this winter. I personally feel that just with the circumstance and everything, it'd be nice to have that road completely done.
Yeah.
Are you confident, are these guys able to get this thing done? Or is it a deal that we agree to the contract and then all of a sudden they're not able to get it done and we're pushed to next spring anyway?
they've indicated to me that they can get it done.
I'm wondering if we could put some kind of a clause in there that if they're not able to get it done, that it has to go up to rebid and.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay this price in the spring.
Yeah, no, I don't think we would.
What I think staff was most concerned about is they've roto-milled the road there to Driftwood already, and then their roto-mill machine's gone, but they've assured us they can get it back.
That's
right?
what they've told me, yes.
That's really where I was concerned, but it sounds like they can get that back for us.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want this to go over the winter without
don't.
getting done. It's finally actually better now. They're driving all on dirt, but they don't have the cuts and whatnot in the previous asphalt. So it's actually a better drive now than it was before, although it
won't
obviously
last
needs
long.
to get done. That won't last. That won't be that way for very long.
For the winter.
Hey, that's a sad commentary when it's cut and that's a better road.
Exactly. That's a very sad commentary.
So I make a motion that.
Larry, sorry,
go ahead.
Councilman, I just had one question, not meaning to ask you to speculate too much, but I guess one of the reasons why, even if you wanted it done this year, that you couldn't go through a regular bid process is because it's late in the season, is that correct?
Yes.
And then secondly, it may also be that because it's a small, the current vendor would be interested in it because they've already got the entire project, so they add it on, whereas if you had another vendor, it's like a piece. You're doing one piece and then another, you're doing the paving and then the...
I think that helped. That's one of the reasons this company felt like they could get it done, is because they were already there.
They're already here.
And then lastly, there was some resident participation. How much of the costs of the 60,000 or slightly under 60,000 would be covered
In
by?
that referenced meeting, you agreed to charge the residents $14 a foot for the curb and gutter based on their frontage. We have documents all prepared. They've been notified the total amount. That is somewhat less than the bid amount, but I think that's the only fair way we could have got it done.
But substantially covered by the residents then?
Yes.
As far as, yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I make a motion that we award the contract for Burton Lane curb and gutter to Advance Paving.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Snell for approval as outlined. Any further discussion?
I have one other thing. In this particular case, it's kind of like you mentioned, the process has been a little bit backwards, I guess. I'm not sure how to best describe it, where we tried to add the curb and gutter to it after we'd already awarded the contract for the paving. We don't sit always in meetings with Public Works, and as road projects come up at the beginning of the year, before they go out, I'm I'm certain that we're having discussions about curb and gutter and where we add that to it, but in light of the last item that we discussed on this, with the Browns on Shepherd Lane, and the lack of curb and gutter in that area, and the lack of curb and gutter and sidewalk in a lot of other areas in the west, the point I want to make, I guess, is can we make sure that we're having discussions before we put things out to bid for street projects, that we are discussing the curb and gutter for those roads prior to getting to that point? Is that fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Very fair.
I'm sure that and I don't mean to make it sound like you guys
ourselves as
don't
well.
do that. I know you guys are smart and you guys have done this a long time. You probably are having those discussions. It all boils down to, how much money have you got, right? I mean, that's really, and how do you want to pay for it? So, but if necessary, I don't know if, I'd be happy to participate in some of those discussions with you to see if we can work out ways that we can make sure this is getting done at the beginning in the springs, we get better prices, and we get a more complete project when a road improvement goes in with the curb gutter and whatnot, in addition to the asphalt. So,
Mayor, just a slightly different point that I'd like to make is that the council, although you don't want to be, to Councilman Page, to your point, that you don't want to be in this situation, and I think the point you made, Councilman Snell, about being notified and the priority we're putting on curb and gutter and sidewalk, we won't probably revisit this situation. But on the other hand, in the purchasing policy and probably most other cities and the state, there are provisions not only for emergency, but for the legislative or policy-making body, in this case the City Council, to override those rules because it's a public process. And the reasons for doing that are clearly stated publicly. And so, although you don't want to do that, it's certainly something that is normal in the procedure for the City Council to be able to do. So,
I agree. Hey, just one comment too, since Mr. Snell gets to demand things.
He's pretty nice about it, but
Yeah.
Wow, did I come across that way?
I would like to say something as well. Active transportation, I mean, when we stripe those roads too, we need to take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Because we've already approved that, and we should be looking at every road with that in mind. Okay.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Snell for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? Mr. Garn, will you start a vote, please?
aye.
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 Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Sunset Equestrian Drainage Agreement.
I think we're all familiar with this one as well. The Sunset Equestrian area, we've been working throughout the summer on resolving some drainage issues. We've gone through the process. I've coordinated with the neighborhood on some design elements. We've got a final design that they're satisfied with. I'm satisfied with. Generically looks like that, which doesn't mean much, but generally a pipe here and then a pipe running back and forth with some collection basins. There was also a second area to the north with just a couple yards that had problems that they wanted to solve with just a single pipe coming out into the curb. I went through the same process on that one, sent it out. I contacted, again, a half dozen people. We received one bid. It came in Tuesday. That bid was for, I think I sent it to you
That's right.
yesterday. It was for $17,000 for the lost my bid sheet. As I recall, it was about $18,000 for the south portion, which is a little bit larger, and about $8,000, $7,000, $8,000 for the north portion, for a total of about
Yeah, I think it's 27 and change.
Yeah, it was 27 something.
The only action that's remaining on this project is to determine how much money you approved. You approved the actual agreement some time ago. with the blank space for the amount of money that the city was going to contribute. You wanted to see what the actual cost was before you committed any funds. So now we have a real cost based on a bid and an engineered plan. We just need to slide that number in, then the agreement can be completed and executed, and we can get a contractor on the ground.
What was that amount again, Andy? Mr. Thompson?
The amount was $27,078.
78?
Just a question. Did they give a timetable on when they could move on this if it was, if it was approved?
I have not talked to this contractor.
Okay. I'm just wondering is it a deal that you can do it this year or?
It was indicated that it would be done this fall.
Okay. Are there any changes, any differences in the contract that's part of our packet here from what we approved earlier? Maybe there's just the blank amount for the dollar
No,
amount.
the contract, there was one minor modification to change it from the homeowners association to the affected homeowners. That was discussed before when you approved it. Otherwise, the contract's exactly the same, or the agreement.
Now, I know a lot of discussion initially was made about the fact that the city could do sweat equity or contribute their pipes that they already had. Is that still in the?
That is not included in this. The pipe that we had in storage at the yard was not the right size. It wasn't in a sufficient quantity to really save us any money. And this is not the kind of work our public works crews typically do. We don't have equipment that would be compatible. So there was not a lot of area that we could do in that regard.
Okay.
All right, well, I think we've discussed this in depth and fast at this point. I would recommend the council make a motion to approve it with 27078, but probably just to make sure the contractor gets it done, approve the amount and execute the agreement subject to it being completed this year, just so there's not any confusion that he says, I'll get back and do that in the spring, that's definitely completed this season. I think we have a representative from the Homeowners Association that would like to say something.
From the homeowners.
I'm Joe Ringo.
Don't talk about what he just said.
No, I'm not. I just I want to make sure that the city and the homeowners are protected. And I don't know if you have any, can I address Andy, is that okay?
Yes,
Okay,
sure.
so I don't know if you have any pull with the contractor, but there's a lot of notes down there that say there could be increases, cold weather stuff. Can we get this converted to a fixed bid, or would we just have you guys approve this amount and then any overages we would be responsible for? Is that?
That's what the agreement says, is that whatever amount we put in there, the homeowners will be responsible for.
Can you go back and request a fixed bid?
We can sign the contract with the contractor in that manner, yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing I'd like to just get clarification on, because there's a bunch of caveats down here that say that prices could go up, there could be an increase, which has nothing to do with the city, it has to do with the contractor. And we're already going to be eating a lot of repair costs and taking that on. And we've also got a separate, we actually went to our homeowners association, got a separate sub-association to take care of the maintenance of that pipe. So we'll be contributing more to that, to maintain that, if anything ever happens. So that's totally on us. But that's the only question I had. And I don't know if you guys just wanted to approve an amount, or if we could approve the amount, and then if I could also request it, see if we could get that fixed bid.
Yeah, so to help me clarify that, understand that if we're just entering into an agreement and agreeing to pay an amount, this isn't our bid per se. You really just need us to authorize an amount to put in that box. And I'm trying to decide if we're just saying an amount and the bid's not our bid, then you can go amend the bid and it doesn't require council action. You're just looking for a dollar amount. Normally, if it was our bid, then tweaking the terms of the bid would definitely have to come back to us. But if we're just talking about the resolution or the agreement and the dollar amount, then the council could decide what that is. If it's $27,078, or if it's $27,000, or if it's $12,000, or
So it
no,
would be
just
basically
kidding.
our responsibility to negotiate approving an amount, and then if we would negotiate the fixed terms, is that correct? Because we would be accepting the contract?
You'll be the actual owner of the project.
Okay. Then that's the only question
I hate to, I'm not legally qualified, but I think that's how I'd understand it. And Shane, I think
I would agree 100%.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everything that you guys have done and how much you've spent time on this with us, and we really appreciate everybody's efforts towards it. And I want to tell you, I feel bad for any contention that took place amidst the council. So thank you for everything you've done for us.
No
That's all I have.
contention.
Thank you. That's
Thank
very
you.
kind of you to say.
Appreciate that very much.
So just as a starting point, let me just throw something out there, good, bad, these kind of.
Can I get a bid? Can I get a bid? 12,500.
Yes, exactly how I was
13.
thinking
I got
of it.
13. Give me 13.5. Give me.
The price is right.
I should have started that higher. Give me a bid at 27. Give me 20.
Yeah.
I'll be giving somebody a little, heartburn out there. Wait, why did he say 12?
So I was just going to suggest, rather than an amount, a percentage of a 50-50 split, and just throw that out there and see what other members think.
That was my thought, too. One thing that was not included is how much the city has already invested in this. I did get an amount earlier today. It's around $2,000 for the architecture designs and everything. So we've already invested that much in it, just to make you aware of that.
If I may remind you also, this bid does not include any restoration of the yards. This basically digs a trench and puts the pipe in the ground. They have taken on all that restoration responsibility on their end. So
That part is in the agreement.
They're not coming up empty-handed,
so.
that they are contributing a significant amount on their end as well. Just so you understand where the agreement is.
I think and I'll just speak, again, someone who doesn't get to, well, I don't know, I guess unless you vote 2-2, then I might vote tonight. But my recollection, or at least my sense was, and I mean this with I do think this will create some expectations in other parts of the city, and we had mentioned that early on. My sense was the expectation was that this would be more than a 50-50 participation, especially with the restoration of the yards, but maybe the neighborhood would like to speak to that. But
yes, thank you. Name is Louis Kemeny again, and I really appreciate the effort that Andy has put forth, and again, your input and your approval. It was approved up to 25,000. I think it came up a little bit higher, and I really appreciate you approving it tonight again. As Andy indicated, we have a lot of work to do. The city, or I shouldn't say the city, the contractor will dig the yard and will mess it up. And he's going to put the dirt back on. Everything else will be under our care. But that is not all. We still need to do our own French drain that will direct from a sump pump somewhere in the yard over to the drain box at the end of the fence. So we have a lot more expenses to incur as well to make sure that the yard is useful and it looks nice. So we do appreciate your effort, your input, and your approval on this project. Thank you very much.
And that's, I guess, the sense that I had, that we had at least indicated that our participation was going to be up to 25,000, but it could be.
I think that when we had talked, that we were wondering what the cost would be, not how much we would actually do. If I recollect differently, I apologize, but
Yeah,
I
I must
thought
admit, I
that-
didn't go back to re-listen to that tape, so I was a little fuzzy, but I didn't recall agreeing to an amount, but we could have definitely, as you suggested, Mayor, that figure could have been
I've been wrong
suggested.
before,
Yeah.
at least once.
I did review the minutes, the written minutes, and there was no dollar amount discussed in the minutes. I know it was discussed in the meeting. I think Councilmember Adams suggested some numbers, but there was no hard fixed number ever determined.
That's what I recall.
We talked
That
about
was part of any motion anyway.
sweat equity and pipe and other things that we might be able to contribute.
Yeah.
What you're saying, we cannot contribute to that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, just a budget question again, because I'm always curious, you think an accountant would figure it out better, I guess, but when we just approve an amount that's not budgeted, where does that come from out of the budget?
Probably in this case, it'd be either other things that we will reduce or fund balance. So we have that requirement to be within 5% and 25% of our general fund as a fund balance, and we would use that as a budget amendment later in the year, fiscal year.
My recollection is that some of the discussion we had was centered around, I think it was Mr. Hale, I think, is it Hale or Hales? Who's not a certified engineer, but did some of the preliminary work on this, and is one of the neighbors involved here, had kind of guesstimated that it was going to be in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. That was my recollection on what he thought the price would come out to be. I don't recall that we had any discussions about what the city's portion of that would be, or vis-a-vis the homeowners, or anything specific about that. And I think we have some precedents to do a 50-50 split with a lot of things, whether it's improvements to streets like we did in the Snow Horse area there on Angel Street, or whether it's pickleball or those other kind of things. Those are some precedents that we have about a 50-50 split. And so I have I think that's a good precedent to set. Although I think my recollection is that at least my understanding and my impression was that in this case, we were talking about amounts that we didn't talk about 50-50 splits or whatever with this specific case. And I don't know that we're at that. So.
And maybe just one thing I would add with this, and some of my sense tells me this is probably what we're gonna hear, but I think we morphed from we can just do this, and we can do it with sweat equity, and we've got pipe, and we can just get it done, to no, we've got to have it bid and engineered the right, I don't want to say the right way, but rephrase, we have to have it bid and engineered, we have to have an agreement, and then we morphed into let's find out what the cost of the pipe, because if we were to go with the 50-50, then it would probably be more fair to say, okay, well, let's talk about 50-50 of installation, construction, restoration, and possibly, if we're really going to address the whole problem, I guess we don't really know what that's going to cost the homeowners, but if we're really trying to take the split approach, then it should probably not just be a split of 27, but a split of whatever the entire amount's going to be, including restoration. But I think the HOA was saying we'll maintain it, the homeowners were saying we'll restore our properties kind of as a portion of their split. Now, rather not collectively that cost them $27,000, who knows, but that was my sense.
To your point, I don't think I'm as concerned as long as, it's not too great, and, we can balance it out in the budget and come up with it with the amount once we've decided to do it. So, if you look at the history of this discussion, I think being new to the council and not maybe thinking through the issue on the first time, if I had it to do over again, it probably wouldn't agree to set this precedent for something like, water table issues or water and how landscaping gets done later, and the whole issue of Kaysville City, liability, which I don't feel there is any liability there. And so the biggest, but then the decision was made at the last council meeting that, we'd already sort of made the commitment, and to renege on that at this point, we'll have to take our lumps, as far as we've sort of set a precedent, and now we've got to draw a line in the sand and say, well, sorry, this was a special circumstance or whatever, but we're not going to do that in the future for any other neighborhood groups. But once you've crossed that Rubicon and made the commitment, I guess the dollar amount's not as important to me as, and part of the reason I'm making this statement is I just don't see voting to take on homeowner issues where it's not the city drainage system, and it's not the city's responsibility in the future. But here we are, and we've got to decide on a dollar amount. So,
and I'd mentioned previously, and the homeowners I don't think are offended by this, but in hindsight, there are two other issues that I can think of prior to this that have come up where they've said the city needs to help pay for this, and the city has said, we're not going to do it. And then on this issue, we decided that we were, and at least one of those two that I can think of has since come to the city and said, what's up? You told us no, you're telling them yes, how are we any different? And it's difficult to, I don't think they're very much different, and so it does create a problem. That being said, maybe the council's action of saying, yes, we'll participate here, not realizing the I don't want to call it repercussions, but the expectations that would come as a result of that motion, I think you're too far down. Now you have to deal with this that was agreed to, and we're going to have to deal with those two. But at this point, to say, gee, we didn't realize that we were going to have at least 2 or 3 other people that are going to ask us to do the same thing, let's renege and pretend like we didn't make this agreement. I think you have to own that agreement that was made.
I agree.
Mr. Kemeny is...
No, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to hear the public officials in discussion. I just would like to remind you, I think I heard Mayor Hyatt indicate that they will pay up to $25,000. I think that's, if we listen to the video, we can probably confirm that. The expectation from all of us that were here at that meeting left with that understanding as well. Mind you, there is 10 to 12 of us, and each of us will have to spend about another $2,000 to $3,000 of our own to do our own piping in our own yards to guide the water onto this main pipe, drain pipe. So it's not only, this amount, the $27,000 that we're talking about. We're talking an additional, at least another $15,000 to $20,000 of our own money that we have to put out to ensure that these pumps and French pipes or French drains are placed in our yards so that our yard can be completely dry. Because just putting one pipe in the very back of the yard is just not going to do it. We need to have additional pipes in our yards as well. So there's additional cost, and there's, of course, the repairing the fence and repairing the gardens and all the sprinkler systems. So there's a lot of additional cost that we have to incur as well. So it's not a freebie from the city, although we do appreciate your support. We're going to spend a lot of money ourselves because of this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Council, there was a, whether or not, I mean, it's up to you. Again, whether or not we say exactly what was said or probably what was intended, and maybe it's a little different for me since I'm not the one who votes, but I think there was probably some level of expectation. I guess if you really wanted to hammer it out, the big problem is it's going to cause a delay, as you could try and figure out what it's going to cost to restore each of the properties and what that cost is, and have them come back with a real number, and then say, we're going to do a percentage of that.
That was, I don't think a percentage was ever discussed before. I just threw that out there for discussion, so I don't think I would be in favor of trying to tabulate all of the expenses and figure out what the half would be. And so I'm fine to go back with a set dollar amount. It seems that, is that your recollection, Mayor Hyatt, that you had mentioned that figure of $25,000?
No, I think he was indicating that maybe I mentioned that figure tonight. I don't recall me giving a figure back then, but I do remember a 25 for some reason. But I have a lot of numbers and a lot of discussions, and I couldn't say for sure exactly what was taking place. But to me, it does come back to one of those, a lot of times people don't remember what you say, they only remember how you made them feel. And I would definitely say the feeling after that meeting was that the city was going to participate in this portion. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not being critical or saying that it's wrong either. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably say, yeah, let's not do that. And I know precedence is a terrible word, but it's reality too, because we're seeing that. But I would just set, in my view, the sense or the feeling that day was, we're going to figure out what this costs so that we can give the city a number. And you can still choose whatever you want that number to be, but you can choose the right number and we can be done.
Well, then I'll make a motion to the city's portion to fill in the blank here in the agreement would be $25,000.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Garn, a second by Councilmember Snell as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for participation.
May I ask one last question? Not involved, just still involved.
You got what you wanted, but if you want to ask more questions, yeah.
My question is
You sure?
Just kidding.
My question is just that if,
You got most of it.
so if we want to get it fixed, or if we want to do anything with the bid, that's up to us. That was the only question.
I bel-
So the limitation would be
If I might.
25, and then anything over and above that, we're going to be responsible.
I will contact Green, successful building bidder, tomorrow morning. I'll set up a meeting with them. I'll invite you. We'll get them moving. We'll see what the issues are. As I read through those notes, we act immediately, the prices are fixed.
And I would say within reason on those kind of things,
Schedules and get
if the bid was to, hey, can we do a pipe that's going to last for 3 years so we can lower the cost and have the contractor do our landscape? I mean, those kind of changes, I think the council would probably have reservations for, but if we're just talking about something to give you some reassurances.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next on our agenda is approval of contract for environmental document for intersection improvements at 200 North and Angel Street.
Yeah, I think some of you may be aware, a couple of years ago, we applied for and received federal funding to improve the intersection of 200 North and Angel Street. At the time we did that, it was a pretty desolate area down there with not a ton of traffic. The growth in that area has increased significantly in the past few years, and so we're glad we got the money for that project. However, the project originally was scheduled for construction in 2019. Those federal funds that we obtained go on a 5-year cycle. So we received so we have the funds ready to go for construction season 2019. Based on the growth, and especially with the new school, we've been in contact with UDOT and the Wasatch Front Regional Council who distributes those funds. The mayor has done a good job at, I won't say twisting their arm, but convincing them. The need has risen faster than anticipated. They went back and found some money that they could make available essentially immediately. Basically swapping our job for another job that has some extra money left in it. However, the first step in securing federal funds is a environmental document is the local entity's responsibility. It's required by federal projects. I've talked to 3 different engineering companies that do this kind of work, received proposals from them, and we've recommended that we engage CRS Engineering to do the environmental document, and we've also asked them to do some of the traffic study as well, right up front. They've given us their proposal. Their price was about $12,000, $13,000 for the environmental, about $7,000 for the traffic. The traffic's a little high, but that's because we've asked them to do some quick analysis and see if a roundabout is a feasible option in this case. There's been a lot of discussion that we ought to look at that. I think we'd be negligent if we didn't at least take one more good look at it. So as they do the counts, they'll run a model for a roundabout as well and see if that is a viable solution.
And Andy, just a question, and not speaking from an engineering perspective at all, but it seems like there would be I'm thinking as a driver, there would be some advantages during non-rush hour at least to a roundabout because you could flow through, but there's also been a safety concern expressed that when you have a roundabout and there's no hard stop like there would be with a light, when pedestrians or students are waiting to cross, is a roundabout, how do you control that with a roundabout? Because with a hard stop, okay, the light's red, now I can cross. How does that pedestrian crossing issue handled with a roundabout?
Roundabouts are not the most pedestrian-friendly treatment you can do at an intersection, just for those types of reasons. Also the throat, or the road widens at the roundabout, so they have farther distance to travel out in traffic as well. But again, I'm not saying we're gonna do a roundabout here. I'm saying I think it's just worth the couple extra $1,000 at this point to give it a good study. If it shows that it has real merit, then we'll pursue it further. If we show that it just doesn't work in this location, we'll throw it out and go on with the rest of the study. But
Okay, and I'm fine with that, but as far as, are there ways, though, to mitigate that inherent risk for pedestrians at a roundabout? Are there ways to sort of, if the decision was to go with a roundabout, can you mitigate so you get essentially the same level of safety, maybe even though you would walk further? And I'm just dreaming here, but if you had some sort of you push a button as a pedestrian and there's actually and this would increase costs, I guess, but there's actually a hard stop or something like that, or a flashing light, or...
as you're aware, our one roundabout in town is near a school. We've primarily mitigated that with crossing guards.
Okay.
You also have the island in the middle, so you're only crossing one lane of traffic at a time. So you only have to look essentially one direction at a time when you step out onto the street. So there are things that can be done.
Part of it is, too, I guess, a roundabout, particularly depending on how it is designed, slows traffic down quite a bit as well. So that's maybe even an advantage over an intersection if someone runs a red light. You can't go through a roundabout at 60 miles an hour.
All those things you're saying is why we're having the engineer look at it right now, so we can at least answer those questions, whichever decision's made.
I just have to say, when we met with Wasatch Front Regional Council and UDOT to ask them about moving this project up on the scope, and I'm sorry, you might have said something about this when I was gone, they did show the footprint of a roundabout, and typically you would build this intersection to accommodate all future growth, which would include 2 lanes going east and west. If you built a roundabout, like by Snow Horse, is a single lane roundabout. If you were going to build this intersection for future improvements, then you'd be looking at a 2-lane roundabout, and those function a little more, much differently for pedestrians. So I've always been, and I'm not saying that I'm not, but I've always been very much we've got to have a roundabout here. That just seems like that would function better. But if we are indeed going to build it for the next 25 years, technically it should really be built as a 2-lane roundabout, and that is not nearly as pedestrian friendly as the others. But those are things I think they'll work out. But it did open my eyes to, it's not just a matter of build it as a roundabout. There's other trade-offs to consider.
At this point, I'm just pointing out that the traffic study portion of their agreement is a little higher because we've asked them to look at those issues.
I see.
Yeah, I drive through the roundabout several times a day, and I'm not a fan.
Well, and then take the Station Park.
I was going to say, Station Park has got a double roundabout.
You know, I see it during the busy hours, and I see it when it's not as busy. I see it when the school is out, and I think traffic lights are more efficient. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Andy, my understanding, because of the way the funding came about and the process, this has to be done pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yes. If things went, and I'll say this hedgingly, if things go perfect, there's a slim possibility we could actually be in construction next summer. No,
Don't hold us to
me
that.
When do things go perfectly?
Things
Still
will
a
have to
federal
go
process.
really smooth, but that's why we need to get this environmental document started now. It does have to go through the UDOT process and their reviews and their right-of-way acquisitions, and those tend to take time. But if we don't start immediately on these things, we'll have absolutely no chance whatsoever.
In other words, luck only happens when you're prepared, right?
Well, I think when governments are offering you money, you do whatever you got to do, and you do it quickly, because those things can be pulled.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. I have read through it, and I'd like to make a motion for the approval of contract for environmental document for intersection improvements at 200 North and Angel Street.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Garn. Any further discussion?
Just a point of clarification, there are two portions of this contract, or are we approving both contracts with one motion?
I think you're approving both with one motion.
Okay.
Probably one contract with two
Facets of
portions,
one
exactly.
contract.
One
Okay.
contract, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Snell, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The next item on our agenda, it's the only downside, I guess.
I like that sound of pens on the pads. It's kind of fun.
All this scrolling.
Yeah.
Is Code of Ethics and Conduct for Elected and Appointed Officials, Resolution 1692. Mr. Scott.
Mayor, at your suggestion and the city council's direction at the last meeting, asked me to take a look at what we had and more or less just take it from a completely unbiased viewpoint. I think the challenge with that was we all have different opinions about what that maybe should look like. I tried to be concise. I felt like that was, if you look at the comments that were received during that 30-day comment period, a lot of them said it's too long, it's too much. So I think being concise, but yet being able to also address all the various issues was a challenge. I also tried to not be repetitive with state or local laws. I feel like those are addressed elsewhere, and if that's a mistake, you're welcome to correct me on that, but I felt like that was just something that wasn't necessary in our code. So I took the code from codes of conduct from 5 different organizations, 4 of which were here in Utah, and 1 was out of state, and I addressed each item they had gone through and made a determination if that applies or would be a good aspect for Kaysville. I think the key portion that I struggled with was the enforcement portion. I feel like that's a tough thing to decide. You can get very, very specific in how you do things. I think I tried to take more of a broad approach while still mentioning a couple of things that are common in other codes, common actions that might be taken. I mentioned this to Councilmember Page today, that I think it's easy for us to see conduct that we don't appreciate or think that might violate, but what do we do when we see that conduct is really a challenge. So what you have before you is a 2-page document with a 1-page resolution sheet in front of it. I feel like that's about as concise as we ought to be, and with your direction it may grow, but that's where I wanted to start.
I'll just mention, I like it. I like this a lot. I like the fact that it's concise. I like the fact that it's principles-based rather than a list of specific behaviors or actions or something that the previous version seemed to go too far down that path. So I like that. As far as the compliance and enforcement, it may seem like a little bit of a incongruity that on the one hand we're saying we expect this to be self-enforcing, although I love that language. Then we actually have some prescribed actions. But the thing that's interesting about those actions is we're listing them here, including the ordinances, Utah Code 52 and 4301 and 10607. But any of these could be done already. For example, official verbal reprimand in an open meeting. You don't really need the code to do that. Formal public letter of censure by a majority of the council, that could be done anyway. Loss of committee assignments, the mayor determines committee assignments unless there's a unanimous vote of the council to override the mayor's decision on that. So otherwise the mayor has to agree. So for all of those reasons, I don't think it hurts to have them in there. It may not hurt also to take them out, but it's just sort of delineating powers that already exist. Just wanted to make that point.
It's a very common also comment in the comments that we received via the ethics email. Very common is that you can probably do these things anyway. Why do you need a code? And I think there's some middle ground there where we could certainly have a code.
Well, and I think I would disagree with that assessment a little bit, with all due respect to the people who made the comment, because I think you could say the same thing about any code of ethics, but the reason it's there is to keep honest people honest, you know, to remind people of what their obligation is. And when new council members come in or whatever, we have that code that, or other planning commission members or other bodies, then they have that there as a guide, and it kind of helps with the expectation. So the fact that we could do that anyway, and that it may be obvious in some ways, is not a reason not to have it.
That I agree. Are you arguing that maybe potentially we tweak it to include other sanctions or other potential sanctions that aren't necessarily specified, or that, you know, we could do anyway without this?
No,
in any fashion?
I don't really, I don't anticipate any other ones, and you also have to be careful. Like I said, these are already all things that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
If you try and put something in there that might be some incongruous or might circumvent or override state code, I think that's a problem too.
Oh, for sure.
And just personally, I don't see the need to, you know, as a body, if the body decides to express displeasure with certain behavior or action, they could do that, but beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I think the voters decide who they choose for the council. The mayor decides who's on the planning commission with the advice and consent of the council, and so I don't know that we really need to get too detailed in this section either. I think my hunch would be it wouldn't be the hill to die on if we took out the specific enforcement things. I would say fine, but my preference would probably be just to leave them there, just so that it's, you know, that's a part reminder. Here's some of the things that a council could do if the other elements of the code are, you know, if the behavior becomes egregious enough that those apply, then here's some of the things that could happen. Letter of reprimand, you know, censure, or something like that, expressing displeasure of the council, or you know, loss of committee assignments, or, you know. So I kind of like having it in there just because it's saying, okay, here I am, read me.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's self-policing, so.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I was just trying to make sure I clarified what your point was. I also, you know, and it appears that in this compliance and enforcement section, a majority vote is able to impose any applicable sanction.
That was the most common.
Sorry.
That was the most common aspect of the other codes, but it wasn't unique to have one member do something. There's also some that mentioned they'd write a letter to the mayor about another member.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also relatively common.
Sure. No, I think it's good to have a majority vote, and do we need to clarify a majority vote of a quorum, or do we need to? I mean, it's possible to not have all members of the council meeting at one time when a vote
Majority
could
of those present?
I'm just throwing it out there. Do we need to clarify? Do you think? I mean, it's not common that we don't have the full council.
Well, you have to have a quorum legally.
You have to have a quorum there.
So
This says a majority vote, but doesn't
Right.
Doesn't really specify.
If you had 3 individuals, you'd have to have 2. If you had 4, you'd have to have 3.
Right.
If you had 5, you'd have 3.
And I think that I'm fine with that.
And that's sufficient, you think? Okay. I just wanted to ask the question. So.
See, I think some of the ethic ones that I read, a lot of it, they put that responsibility on the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
But if the council feels, or the mayor's not willing, you know, which happens sometimes, then the majority of the council has the right to impose those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we're talking about council members present, there's something specific in the state code that, and I believe it's modifying the powers and duties of a city manager, because I think we had that discussion recently. And it was a majority of the council and the mayor or the unanimous council.
That's right.
But that wasn't the majority of the present council. So if you had 2 people missing, then it's a no-go. You couldn't change that. It was the majority of the council. And so as this is worded right now, I would take this to mean the majority of the council. So if you had a quorum of 3, that you couldn't impose something with just 2 council votes. because that would be 2 council votes with 3 would be quorum, and that would be sufficient for
That
any
may
other
be a valid
action. But
point.
I think if your intent is to have it be the majority of those present, but something like this, I think that's the difference maybe between a majority and a supermajority. It is a supermajority, a majority of the total elected body, not just those present. And maybe I'm using that term the wrong way, but it seems like that's what it was, what the term refers to. So if that's what you want, I think we at least need to add some words to clarify that portion. On something this serious, to me, it would almost need to be just the majority of the council. I mean, 'cause that's still just 3.
I would agree with
Right,
that
I
as well.
agree with that, because
But not
now
two.
that I think about it,
Yeah.
it doesn't even necessarily have to happen at the time the behavior is happening, right? At a subsequent council meeting, when we have a majority or the full council.
Yeah, and in fact,
That
a
action.
letter, we're not going to be able to pen a letter,
Right.
during the meeting, so it would, if it's a letter, then that would be later anyway.
Sure.
But the one concern I would have in requiring the full council for the vote to be present is, right now is a good example of what's happening down in West Jordan. I do believe they've got a city council member that is in the middle of some pretty serious things, that charges, and he's not showing up to city council meetings at all. So that would prevent any kind of vote of any sort.
No, I don't
as
think
long
it
as he
would
didn't-
prevent the vote as long as you had a majority. So with 3 votes, so if, say, 4 members in a 6-member council, if 4 members were there, if you got 3 votes, then that's the majority of the council, right?
So that
Even
that
though-
would be acceptable in this
Mhm.
wording?
Yeah,
Okay.
you just couldn't have 3 council members and only have 2
Right,
votes
right.
to do it, yeah.
Just as long as that wouldn't stop the vote.
Yeah, or you could even say a supermajority of
Yeah.
4.
But there are only 3 of you here, and you wanted to take action, and one of you was unwilling, then it's
a no-go,
Then
yeah.
it's a no-go. With
But if
only
you had all
3 of you
3
here, it
votes-
has to be unanimous.
Yeah.
There's 4 of you here, it has to
Right.
be 3-1. If there's 5 of you, it has to be
Yeah.
3-2. There was one discussion or recommendation that I made that may be unnecessary, but when we put the original document out on the website and asked for feedback, we received a fair amount of feedback, and then made the decision just to kind of scrap it. And I don't want to scrap it and start over, but that's not really, but that's kind of what we did. There's something about taking this document, even though it's been available in our packet, and there's something about saying, hey, give us feedback on a document, and then say, okay, thanks for all the feedback. We've now scrapped that document. Here's a new one. I don't know that you need 30 days, but I would at least recommend that this new version, we specifically say, okay, between now and our next council meeting, if you have feedback on this version, provide it to us. The same thing, ethics@KaysvilleCity.com, because we anticipate adopting it at our next meeting. It might be overkill, but there's something about asking for feedback on a document, scrapping it, creating a new one, and not asking feedback on that one's.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, if you go to the next council meeting, that's 3 weeks.
That's 3 weeks.
So that's 21-day comment period. That would probably be sufficient. I don't know that we need to have quite as long a one as we had last time, but.
No, I don't think so either. And you could even say 2, I mean, we would typically do the agenda 1 week, 2, let's say 2 weeks from tomorrow, since we have 3 Thursdays. So you could really open it for comment tomorrow, or 2 weeks from tonight, and say, we're going to open it tomorrow for comments. I don't know that you're going to get a lot more, because I think this is a little bit different approach, but say 2 weeks from tonight it's due, so that when the agendas are prepared, you've already got that feedback, and Shane Mr. Scott can compile it and have it for you in your next packet. So
Okay,
even a
so-
2-week comment period.
Do we need to make a motion then to table it and bring it back to the council?
Probably a motion to table it till our next council meeting, and post a 2-week public comment beginning tomorrow and ending on Thursday, the 29th.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Snell, with a but, I can feel.
No, I just have an additional comment to make, but it's not relative necessarily to the motion that we're making.
Okay, thank you. We've recognized the motion, the second. Further discussion?
There we go. I just, a lot of the feedback that we received on the initial code of conduct dealt with this issue of bias, and I've been thinking a lot about that. And a lot of people perceived that it was a very biased code of ethics that was directed at a particular individual. And, you know, I understand completely where that comes from. But I think there's a lot of maybe misunderstanding of or misuse of the word bias. In my opinion, bias reflects unjustified or unreasonable assumptions someone might make, you know, someone's skin color or someone's, you know, whatever else means that they will act or think a certain way. That's a bias, that's an unjustified. The comment I want to make is that, you know, a lot of work, a lot of effort went into that original code of conduct. Mostly, again, by a lot of the clerical work was done by Mr. Robinson, and he has been openly critical of Mr. Adams in council meetings. I just want to make sure that it's clear, and I'll cast this as my opinion. You guys can, everybody else on the council can say what they want, but many of the items in that original code of conduct, I agree with what we've done to change and have made it more general rather than being so specific. But a lot of that was in response to observed behavior. And it's different to respond to observed behavior than it is to have a bias, an unreasonable prejudice or bias against someone. And I think that is a key and important difference. And I appreciate personally, and not just because he's a neighbor of mine and a friend, Mr. Robinson's efforts and the work that he did to compile the information that Mr. Page, Mr. Garn, and myself, not in any meeting that we had, because we had no meetings on our own, we each submitted via email things independently and sometimes, you know, in a group email fashion to Mr. Robinson to have him compile that. And I think there was a lot of mischaracterization in the feedback that we got on that original code of conduct that I think is unjustified regarding, you know, this issue of bias and regarding the fact that Mr. Robinson did it or you know, had such a hand in it. So I just wanted to make that comment because I think again, I'm glad that we have done what we've done. I think it will be a better code of conduct in terms of being general. It's principles-based, and I think it's simpler and easier for us to implement and I think enforce. But I disagree with the term bias being thrown around with regard to that original code of conduct, because I don't think it was biased. It would have applied to every one of us on the council equally, the planning commission members. It would have applied to everyone equally. It wasn't targeted at one particular individual, although, you know, you can read some of the elements in there to have been responses to particularly specific observed behaviors that had happened. Yeah. You know, and so that's not bias.
Let me make just one comment as well with the, you know, the people sending in things. It wasn't all negative against it. We actually had ones that people said they want it tighter as well. I mean, so it's not just one road. It was all over the place. And I think that needs to be brought out as well. And as Chris said too, I appreciate so much Mr. Robinson and the effort that he put in there. And you know, we all know the time commitment we have, and he put an extreme amount of time into this, and we appreciate that. And
pro bono.
And I think as well, I think that because of this discussion, we have a better document, and I think that's the important thing.
And I would like to second everything that both of my colleagues have said here, and maybe just add one other thing, that process, because there was also questions regarding is what you did constituting a public meeting because you were discussing the ethics? And I think clearly, I mean, that's one thing, and I think as a council, I have observed that this is true, that we don't deliberate. We haven't had meetings at all outside of the council meeting that are not public. We don't deliberate even by email, but 2 points, and I love hearing David Church. We were just at the ULCT today, and I went to his presentation again because it's always interesting. I learned something new, even though it's basically the same material. But he addressed it this way. He said, the legislature addressed this issue, and emails are not considered meetings. So from a technical perspective, you could have 3 council members talk about an issue and it wouldn't be a violation. However, he said that the spirit of the Open Meetings Act is that you would not deliberate or discuss issues to be brought before the council, and he feels like that's just, that would be the justified approach. And I agree with that, but it's important also to differentiate between deliberating and making decisions, because that's easier than doing it in the public process, than maybe going before people and having to defend your position or persuade or whatever. That because it's easier and more efficient, you would do it and you would come to a conclusion, and as a majority or a quorum of the council, you would actually make a decision before the meeting. I can honestly say that's never happened, not even close. That's way different than, are you aware of this issue? This just came up. Mayor will send something out. Send something out in an email just to make the council aware. That's a lot different than deliberating. So that's not only in keeping with the technical rule that the legislature has set up on Open Meetings Act, but also, I think, in keeping with the spirit.
That's right.
And so when we had, and I think at the end, we included also the Planning Commission members, the full council. Chris came in slightly before, but for most of that whole period of time, it was just Councilman Page and myself, so we weren't a quorum. But all we were trying to do was to put together a draft of concepts, not to decide, deliberate, or come up with a final version, but just to have something that could be considered by the public. And so I wanted to make those points too, because that's come up, that were you violating the Open Meetings Act by producing this document? And the answer is no, we weren't, not even close, neither by the technical rule or the law of the Open Meetings Act, nor by the spirit.
Well, I think it's good for the public to understand how the process works as well. I mean, there's several things that we're looking at right now. Like, for example, yourself and Mr. Adams is working on our procedures. I mean, and that's an extensive document. There will be tons of time put into that. I mean, the rest of us aren't even involved in that until it's brought up until the discussion stage. Susan Lee and myself are on a committee that's serving with members, and which also this will apply with them as well, to make sure that when everybody's put on a committee, there's an expectation of behavior, and because we're representing the people. And when they're asked to serve on a committee or a commission, it's the same thing. Our next item that we're going to talk about, the creation of a power commission, they're going to be held to that standard as well, and there's an expectation, because we're all public servants, and I think that's important for everybody to understand. We don't just bring an item up and then we discuss it and make a decision. I mean, there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of not only creativity, but research, and a lot of the city puts a lot of time into these things as well, and a lot of citizens are approached to get their opinions, and I think the process is very important, and what we see at the very end and what we discuss is really a small portion of what's actually put into a document.
Okay. Remind me who made the motion. I know I had a second by Councilmember Snell, but Councilmember Lee, thank you. I have a motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Snell to table the item for our next scheduled council meeting and open it for public comment through Thursday the 29th. Any further discussion? Mr. Page, we start a vote, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Power Commission created, Ordinance 1692. Mr. Scott.
Yes, on August 4th, we received some direction from you to take the steps to look toward a power commission. And I believe the passing of this ordinance would be step one. It's been mostly looked at by Councilmember Lee and myself, as well as Power Department staff. Gary and Bruce have both looked at this document extensively. I believe it's probably pretty close. I think there's been some discussion about the, maybe not need, but should we have a public hearing in creating this commission? I don't know if that's necessary, but it might be a decent idea. But I think the main thing I would take away from the document that you're looking at is that this commission would be completely advisory. I think that's an important distinction that we make. And there's probably some pros and cons to creating a power commission, but I think the pros are heavily outweigh the cons, and this could be a great advisory board to take on some of those technical aspects of having your own power company that we're not always able to vet ourselves. And one good example of that may be next month in our solar discussions, as that'll come back to you on the 20th of October. So. I believe this is pretty close to ready. If you have any comments about it, we're happy to look at those. And if you'd like to have a public hearing regarding this issue, we're happy to do that as well.
And I'll just speak to the public hearing part. I know I was one that was in favor of that. Similar fashion, if you're ever consider raising power rates, you're not required to have a public hearing to do so. But anytime you make a large move that impacts people, and who knows how much this will impact folks, but I feel like the gesture of a public hearing, we may not have very many people comment, and they may just say, yep, it's a great idea. But I think you can over public hearing things, but this feels like enough of a change that there might be some insight in this, in the way this is prepared that we've not otherwise considered. And I think the suggestion to create it was great, and I just feel strongly that there should be some opportunity to comment if anyone would like it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the idea. I agree it's not necessary, but I do agree that it would be useful to have public comment so people can review this and spark some interest in maybe some of those individuals applying, and serving on that commission. And also to make comments about, how the process that will be involved. These commissioners will be tasked with not making the decisions, but they are largely like the Planning Commission. They are a recommendation body. They'll be making suggestions. They'll be looking at the technical and kind of get a little bit more granular maybe than we do here at the City Council level. Into some of those issues and make recommendations then based on the power company for the City Council to take action, because the City Council is the ultimate deciding, and that's clearly set out here in the ordinance. And it would be good for people to be able to review that and take a look. The one question I had is in section 2. It's on the final page. This ordinance shall take effect upon the date of publication of a summary thereof, one time only in the Davis Clipper. And that's fine. I don't know that there's that many homes that take the Davis County Clipper. I don't know how many homes in Kaysville that goes to. Could we publish it to the website as something, or maybe even push email out as a notification?
I think by ordinance we've designated the Davis County Clipper as the public publication. So there are certain things that we have to publish in a paper, and by default, well, not by default, but by election, we've done that. That's always something to consider too. I don't know if they would tell us that, but I mean, and usually when it's published in the Clipper like that, you go to that legal section, and it's like a little classified ad.
Right.
It's really,
someone's going to have a magnifying glass to read it.
Yeah. But I assume that we would put this on the website regardless, that we would put it on the Facebook page, that we put it on Twitter.
I just was thinking, as far as a publication to inform the public, which is, I think, the intent behind publishing it in the Davis Clipper. Maybe a push notification, of an email out, informing people might be something to consider, and if not now, then perhaps in the future as a means of getting information. Because I think, in today's digital world, I think
we're getting away from
that would get to more people than the Clipper.
And are you talking about the notification of the creation? Or are you saying just in general about the commission?
Yes.
Who is,
Well, and I do know
Big
that
bump.
every time that we put out the agenda, when we put out the public hearing, it seems like that is hitting more and more people. And so that, I think, will actually hit more people than the Clipper.
I agree.
Absolutely, and that's the goal. You know, we do that at the state too. Fortunately, it doesn't prescribe newspaper, but that was the tradition previously. And if you think about it, I mean, there was a time, I'm even old enough to remember when if you wanted to look for a used car, you looked in the paper.
That's right.
And all the legal notices, you know, that's where people went. And there was, at the time those ordinances were probably passed, that was an excellent way to contact people, and maybe the only way, you know, other than just mouth to mouth or person to person. Now that's changed a lot, and so we may want to actually rethink that a little bit, what our requirement is, and maybe update that to how people actually get their information.
Yeah, I think, you know, this kind of brought that up. That's kind of what I was hinting at, is in more general, yes, with this particular issue, but in more general terms, that's probably a better way to reach people than
Definitely.
than the Clipper.
Well, so are we
No
going
offense to the
to
Clipper, you know. and-
table this and have a public hearing in the next, before the next meeting? Is that what we're
yeah,
proposing?
you could table it and schedule a public hearing for Thursday, October 6th at
On.
6:30 PM or 6.
Okay, I make that motion.
6:30, yeah.
I'll second.
I think we have a motion and a second to table this item and schedule a public hearing for 5 PM on Thursday. Oh, I'm sorry, 6:30 PM, Thursday, October 6th. Any further discussion?
Just one question, maybe either Susan or Shane can explain. How would you go about choosing these members?
It's a good question. I think maybe some of you know individuals in the industry that might be good, but I think I would like to do a similar thing that we did with the library, maybe put it on our newsletter, make an effort to make it as open and available to everybody as possible. But it's a challenge. It's hard to find
Well,
good
my
people.
big thing is I would like to see representation from a lot of the people that's going to be affected. I mean, we definitely need somebody from the solar industry that's going to be in here, and we need other people that perhaps in their occupations and stuff,
Yes.
they'd have an expertise in this
Yep.
area, which I think would be extremely important.
And that's the plan, and that's exactly why we're doing this, is so that we can get that expertise. And
So in that notice, we could say preferential
yeah,
preference would be given to those that have a knowledge of this industry.
And the process that we use for the planning commission, we have our planning commission applications, actually boards and commissions application, doesn't even say planning commission on it, even though I don't know what other boards and commissions we have. But it does say that on it. And you've all, have we appointed? Yes.
Yes.
You've all seen what the application looks like. It's 2 pages. Ask them to say why they think they'd be qualified for this position. It's not planning commission specific, but I think in similar fashion, that might be a recommendation, is that, at least with the planning commission, I outline a process of what I recommend, and you all say, yep, that's a great process. And that's been anything from posting on the website, on the Facebook page with a PDF link, in all of these locations in the newsletter. They're due by this date at this time. They'll all be compiled, distributed to the city council to have a chance to review. And I think for all intents and purposes, you could treat it very much like the planning commission. 'Cause it sounds like it'll operate very much the same way.
I really like
sounds
this.
good.
I just want to say thank you to Councilman Lee and our city manager, Shane Scott, for working on this. I think, you know, I join my colleagues in thinking that's a great idea, you know, and we certainly do that with planning and zoning issues, with the planning commission who holds hearings and looks at those issues in detail and gets a second review. And clearly, in my mind, something where we're running our own power company, it makes a lot of sense. And
Awesome.
the only question is, why didn't we do this before? You know, it's a great idea. So.
Well, the big thing is we're going through some massive changes, and the whole environment's going
Yeah.
through changes, and I think it's essential. But, you know, I think the bigger point is anytime you get the citizens involved, that's really good.
That comes
And
to-
I think this is the model of what we need to do in the future on a lot of issues that we have facing Kaysville.
I think we'll have a lot of response, especially as it relates to power issues. I think a lot of them will be very energized.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's got to be an app that does that little demo. All right, so we have a motion.
I think we already did it, didn't we?
Yeah, we have a motion and, yeah, I'm sorry, I wrote down my note.
Yeah, we have a second. I don't think we voted yet.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table the item as outlined. Any further discussion? Who was the second?
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Oh, that's right, it was.
I'm used to having something to, all right. Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote for us?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The next item on our agenda is council member reports. Any reports?
I have a report. Many of you know, obviously, that 2 weeks ago tomorrow, Mr. Vance Garfield had his final day in a Kaysville City uniform, such as it was for him. He prepared, and he wanted me to distribute to you each a copy of a trivial adventure, a trivial pursuit. It's actually a questionnaire, it's a quiz, it's a test, there will be grades, and it's pass or fail. So I think you already have one there, so if you can pass.
Are you saying he has too much time on his hands now, or is that what it is?
Well, there's some 150 questions in this thing about history and about involvement from Vance's 33 years in Kaysville City. That I invite you, now this is on the honor system, because the answers are at the back of this booklet. But if you, I invite you, I actually was flying to, I can't remember where, I was flying to Chicago when he gave me this. And so on the flight, I sat and went through this. And I invite you to take the quiz and see how well you do. The answers are at the back, and you can grade yourself at the end.
I'm going to do it in pencil.
You know what, I didn't even think about this until now. Vance wrote all of these questions, paid for it himself to have it bound and put together. But I think there would be many who may enjoy, you know, like number 18. In 1984, with three parks and recreation began offering Eagle Scout service projects. Today, they average 28 completed projects annually. At the end of 2015, how many have there been? I mean, they're just fun, unique questions that I think if Vance was willing, you know, that might be a fun thing to share on our Facebook page or something like that. But
yeah, that's true. Anyway, I'll give this to Councilman Adams, because this is his copy of it. But anyway, just a fun thing that he wanted me to make sure that I distributed to the rest of you.
I feel like I should answer that question now. It's like a cliffhanger, you know, to all three people watching at home.
If I recall, it's in the 400s, 428 or something like that.
Right.
Wow.
So I'll look it up.
I'm afraid that I'll look at an answer or something.
I just had a report on something. Or
421.
421. We have met with our first meeting. Larry and I are both on the committee for the old library building, and it's a great group of people that have history with the city, and it's going to be very interesting to see what comes of it all. But we were able to go in and tour the old library and see what's left, and so anyway, I look forward to doing that.
Yeah, this is a fun process.
Deciding what's going to happen.
All I want to know is how much did the books weigh in that northwest corner? Clearly, they weighed a lot because the floor goes like this.
It is sinking. We did notice it's sinking.
It's some heavy books over there.
Shoot, that takes out the bowling alley.
Pins in the corner.
How many people are on the committee?
17.
I thought it was 12 or 13.
I was counting
I guess,
three
yes.
of us. Yeah.
Maybe 12 residents. And
Yeah.
So 15 maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or is
great
Mayor
turnout.
on it?
Boy, we have some neat people there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
great.
it's
Get a lot
actually
of
nice.
different perspectives.
Yeah.
That way.
No, it's going to be good.
That's great.
Any other council member reports?
Just briefly, on the issue of parking around Davis High School that we discussed last week, we're going to be meeting with the Davis High School Community Council members, whoever can make it, either on Tuesday or Thursday. I haven't heard back from them, but gave them both those opportunities. Councilman Snell's available. I think Chief Oberg's available. Others, Andy, if you're available either of those evenings. Community Council, and also I don't know if we can contact them that soon, but I'd kind of like to involve the Youth City Council as sort of a service project, maybe to gather, maybe do a survey or something like that of both residents and students, and come with sort of a prioritization of what we can do now to help alleviate the problem, what the city can do, and maybe if there's other things that will take more time, but we can kind of list those and have an action plan for how to do something. I'm not sure that we'll be able to completely solve it with 2,700 students and 700 parking spots, but we'll at least be able to hopefully make it better and, have some good solutions come out of the process, so.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other items for councilman reports? All right, hearing none, we'll move to approval of minutes. You have one set of minutes dated September 1st, 2016. If you've had a chance to review it, welcome for their motion for approval.
I've read the minutes, Mayor. I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Page for approval of the minutes. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a review of claims. You have one set of claims that has been emailed out. Sorry, just trying to get it. There we go.
While you're looking that up at the end, I know that this has been brought up in the past, and it was actually really before Shane was our new city manager. The need to get the claims to us sooner and in a more timely manner rather than the day before. It would be really appreciative if we could get it no later than the Monday before the city council meeting, so that we have time to go through it. If we have questions, we'll be able to get with staff, ask them. Because right now, the way it's done, the way it's, it's given to us the day before, it really doesn't give us a lot of time to really do anything.
Have you discussed this a lot as a council? I guess, do you know why they do it the day of? The
day before.
The day before. The day before. The purpose is to maximize the ability to pay those claims immediately. So if something comes in, if we do the claims on Monday, the thought is, well, if an invoice comes in on Tuesday, that person has to wait until the next two weeks to get paid. So in an effort to pay people in a timely manner, they wait till the day before. I guess I just, in thinking out loud, I don't know, in my previous city, we did claims that had been paid. So those were just almost acknowledgments from the council that when there weren't items that weren't budgeted, those came before the council special. But if it was something that was just a budgeted item, those could be paid as they came in, and they were just acknowledged as claims at whatever council meeting, so it didn't matter. So maybe something we want to talk about, then it wouldn't matter when they were prepared. It would just be a cutoff date of any sort. But we could do Monday, even the way we're doing it now, and just acknowledging that if something comes in on a Tuesday, it would just be a little bit longer processing time to get the bill paid.
I don't know if this is and in the world of software, this seems like it could be a fix, but one of the things that I had understood is the way that we're set up currently, once we close claims, and if the council's going to have any edits, then that system is locked. You can't start the next 2 weeks' claims until this has been acknowledged and accepted. So if we close it Monday, and then obviously staff's not going to hit the pay button until the council approves it,
right.
You've got through Friday that nothing new could be entered in. So basically they're just there, and that's a lot of the time is what taking it, acknowledging, entering the paying information, make sure it goes to the right cost center, make sure it's being applied to the right. It's not just a matter of, well, I mean, there's a lot of them on here. There's $1 million worth in this claims, in this set of claims. So by by doing that with our system until we hit pay. So so yesterday, when they ended it at 4:06 PM on the 14th, she's not been able to do anything today at all on new claims until they release it tomorrow. And Ryan's our IT guy. I don't know how familiar Ryan, but that was my understanding. Part of the reservation was if we do it that early, we're going to be sitting, if we say Monday, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of no entering anything, which is.
I just am wondering because, fresh eyes coming into all of this, if there's a better way to do it, like you just suggested, how you were doing it in your previous city. I'm open to doing it that way. It just would be nice to have those sooner than what we have.
Definitely. And if you think about it, this is the third opportunity you have to approve something. You're approving it when you set the agenda. Then we go through our procurement process for anything over those certain spending limits. You approve those at those times as well. So this is actually a third time you're saying, okay, now I acknowledge that. And I just would wonder if that's absolutely necessary. So, and if it isn't necessary, this would remove that. We could all pay those claims on Monday or Friday or whatever it was, and then we could start paying those bills immediately, and you would just acknowledge that claim as it came in.
One of the boards that I sit on, that's how they do it. They provide the board a list of checks that have been cut.
Right.
I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to do it. It seems like if the concern is could we get it sooner so we could review them, and then we move to you just pay them all week long and we'll acknowledge it at the end. That's kind of, I think, the way it was intended, but that might be a further departure from what's being asked, is to say, could we have more time to review so we can scrutinize, versus that would just be really no oversight whatsoever. And maybe it's not, as I mentioned, on this board, they provide it to us, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, here's all the checks that have been cut, and we can ask questions, but they've already been cut.
Good point. It would still be a detective function, though, after the fact, which the council could still raise concerns, and it would give you more time to review. I guess my only concern, and without getting too far into the weeds, I mean, typically if you're going to extend it another 2 weeks or 3 weeks for those invoices that might come in on a late Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, what does that do? I mean, I don't know if you have a sense because a lot of those bills might have a given date. I mean, sometimes they're pay 30, sometimes they're discount with 7, paid in 7 days, you get a discount. And so there's a variety of different arrangements depending on the vendor and the situation. And I'd just be a little bit concerned that if we made that move, that we're going to have some invoices be delayed another 2 weeks, that we take into consideration any costs that we might incur by doing so.
That's exactly the concern. That's exactly the concern. And I guess maybe, Mayor, to your point, I would also argue that once we receive an invoice, we've already rendered a service. It would be hard if you scrutinize it. It is more of a detective. We can talk about what's in there, what happened, why, and it's probably almost even at that point something we can't do much about. I guess if you say we don't want that paid, we can hold that check, but you'd almost argue that we have a moral, if not a legal obligation already to pay that bill, whether it was a good thing or not.
And that's an excellent observation. As far as I know, only Congress can actually make promises and then follow through on them. So I don't want to start that here. So if you've already got the obligation, it would be more of a detective function, and maybe that's the answer. If you went to review, then you'd have more time to review them before voting to sort of, okay, I'm okay with everything. If you had an issue raised, then you could raise the issue but have more time. Maybe that's the answer, and that way you don't mess up the payment process.
Yeah.
And if you leave the process as it is, I mean, assuming nothing could be done to tweak that software, or if it's the way it's worked right now, assuming we have council meetings essentially every 2 weeks, you've got one day that we're already saying claims are closed on Tuesday. We have on Wednesday, we have council on Thursday. You've got 9 working days for Kay to enter this stuff. And this is the large part of her job is assigning these things. By moving it up, you're now saying instead of 9 days, you're giving her 6 days to do the same job or the same function. And I'm not, it's just something to consider, because the amount of time that you'll be freezing it will be longer, I guess. And as Shane put, I mean, I don't think it's intended, assuming we have proper oversight, I don't think it's intended for the council to say, yeah, I don't want to pay that, or yeah, I don't want to pay that. Rather, if we've got a manager that's saying, yes, I'm reviewing these, I'm ensuring that these are budgeted items, any non-budgeted items aren't being paid, then, but you still have the opportunity. I don't know that it's intended for us to be a no, yes, yes, no, although we've done
No,
that before.
I don't look at it that way. I
Right.
look at it just trying to see, sometimes there's things that come up and I'm just, okay, why are we doing this? Or why, and it gives us time to get an explanation on it.
Our current timeline is actually from Councilmember Lee's suggestion previously, because we used to do it like
The
an
day.
hour before the meetings. I mean,
Oh,
we'd come
my
here and they'd
goodness.
be stacked
Yeah.
here. And so the moving it a day before was, I think, kind of an intended compromise to say, we'll at least give the council a minimum of 24 hours to review it, so they're not just reviewing it when they show up.
Well, if it's okay with you, I'll talk to Dean upon his return, and we'll see what we can do to tweak some of those things and get it to you quicker. I'd love to see that come to you faster.
Shoot, I'm going to go work for the city. I'm 30, 60 days, get my money.
Yeah.
We do not want to incur penalties, though, and
Yeah.
interest. That's a thing I think would be really a negative if that was the case, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, 7 days to get paid.
Not bad. All right, so do we have a motion? We have a set of claims. Welcome a motion and a second for their approval.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the claims in the amount of $1,268,611.14.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page. Any further discussion? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Next on your agenda is approval of calendar with a nice new format.
Yay.
We have, as you look forward to the month of September, our last movies in the park will be this Saturday, the 17th, Heritage Park. Appreciate Maverick, who has sponsored those events for us this year and covered the cost of providing that service to our community. We also have on the 8th, October 8th, is the Monster Mash and Dash at Heritage Park 5K run and Monster Scare, Scarecrow decoration. Always a fun event. Would welcome everybody out to that as well. And then any other items? I think we have. Has everybody RSVP'd except for me to the meeting with the school board?
That's the lunch on the 4th.
The luncheon? Okay. Maybe I did. All right. So, and then we make sure these events are available on the city website or on Kaysville Recreation website as far as our community events go. Last but not least, we have a motion. Our last item on our agenda is an adjournment, and it's 9:30.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second for
We have 2
a
seconds.
historic event, a 9:30 adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Wow.
Cool. You know what? I made it all the way through.
Yeah.
We could have gone on for a long time. I still have, I'm trying
Did you make all the notes you wanted to make?
well, I haven't figured that one out yet.
Oh, okay, good.
I haven't figured that one out.
Something yet to learn.
But I still have like 72% of my time, so we could have made it.